All right. Well, I'm really excited to be with you today. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the pastors here at Restore. We are in our new series, The Present Time, and we're kind of just talking about kind of slowing down God's expectation for us. Dylan let us off a few weeks ago with a phenomenal message. If you missed it, I highly encourage you to listen to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And David had last week's message, a great part of the series. And today we're going to talk about Sabbath. And next week you get to implement Sabbath in your life as we get to have Sabbath Sunday, where we just celebrate a chance for us to take time and rest, right? There's a couple different places in Scripture that they talk about Sabbath when God kind of downloads His commandments for His people. And so we're going to kind of look at a couple of those areas today. Throughout time, throughout cinematic history, in our world today even, we have moments of resistance, right? Where somebody or some group of people find it within themselves that they've decided that enough is enough and they're going to go against the man, right? Enough is enough, and we're going to kind of take back what has been taken from us. They're one of my favorite shows, The Handmaid's Tale. In it, towards the end of the series, June, the main character, leads a resistance movement to take almost 100 children and some of the Marthas out of Gilead, which was formerly the United States, and get them on a plane to Canada to safety. And they call it the Lost Children of Gilead. And so she leads this massive resistance against the man because they have been tortured and abused, and she's had enough is enough. I'm taking back the power. Last night, you could put this slide up, that first slide there, Adeline decided to lead a rebellion against the man, right? She has recently transitioned to the railing off of her bed, and so we put the railings off, but it's secured by another piece of wood up on the side there. And so she'll, as the last few nights have gone, she'll get up and try to sneak out of her room, and she'll run to her brother's room thinking that there's safety in that area, right? And so last night, as I was up putting her to bed, and if anyone's ever had a toddler, kind of that transition period, you kind of have a stakeout outside the room, right? And then they come out, they look outside, and they go back in, hopefully. And last night, silence is one of the most deadly indicators that something is wrong in your household. It's either sleep or it's resistance. Last night was the resistance moment, and I could hear something kind of tumbling around in her room, and I went in to find her laying in bed, and I went in and I was like, Adeline, you got to go to sleep. And I kind of turned her over, and something was like this sticky or this felt wet, and I'm like, what in the world? And I go turn on the light to her room, and all over her face is this balm. She's got it over her eyes. She's got it down her face, her cheeks. She's got it all over her arms and hands. She's got it all over her bed. She's painted it on her bed, right? And I go over and I find the balm container, and it looks like this. And she had tossed it back into this mesh basket that we have on her changing table dresser, that looks just like a disaster, right? That resistance that I'm going to do what I want to do until I get caught by the man. Till the man caught her, right? And that was the act of resistance yesterday. If you know my father is a very safe driver. He follows the rules. And yesterday, late afternoon, we were going to drop off a package at the UPS store, and as we were coming back across town, to go back to our house on Center Street, getting close to the viaduct, my father, there's a police officer passed us on the left which isn't a surprise because he's much like me. He doesn't drive much over the speed limit, right? And so as the officer drives by us, we get up to the light. I think it's on South Street. And as the officer goes by, my dad runs a red light. Oh, and you would have thought that I could just see it. He slowed down as he got through the red light. And I thought the officer was in front of us, right? I thought he was going to go over and pull himself over in front of the police officer and let him know what he had done, right? He ran the red light because that was his moment of resistance against the man, right? No red light's going to stop him in that moment. When I was in college, my freshman year, we had a gentleman that was the dean of men and also the dean of students at our school. His name was Larry Olson, but everybody called him Coach. And Coach called me into his office one day right before our fall break, and he said, "Ryan, your hair is getting too long. I need you to take care of it when you go back." And so I told him, "No problem, I'll take care of it." And I got a message out to a friend of mine who was doing a cosmetology class. And I asked her if she could cut my hair when I came back for fall break, and she said, "Yeah, no problem." And so I got back home, and the next day I went into the school to get my hair cut, and as I sat down, she said, "I got something else I'm thinking about. I got to do one perm to be able to graduate. Will you let me perm your hair?" And of course, at this time, my hair was long. It was down to my shoulder. It was long enough for a perm. She says, "I think it's just long enough for a perm." And so I got it permed, and it was, oh my goodness, this was beautiful. It was tight curls. And so I went to school after the fall break. I got on campus, and a few hours into my time on that Monday being back on campus, I got a message that I needed to be seen in the Dean of Men's office. And I walked into his office, and Coach Olson was sitting at his desk, and he reminded me a lot, as I thought back over the years, of a very nervous Chris Farley as he would sit down at his table. If you ever saw Chris Farley in one of his skits when he's kind of acting real nervous, when he was interviewing people for one of his skits on SNL, right? He'd be so nervous, and so I sat down at his desk, and he's on the phone at the time, and I kind of sat down very with a lot of power in my sitting. I sat down, and he looked over at me, and he just shook his head, and he's like, "Something just came into my office. I've got to go." And he puts his phone down, and he looked at me and says, "You gotta please tell me that's not real." And I said, "Coach, I wish I could tell you it wasn't real, but it's real, and it's spectacular." And so he said, "This is not what I meant when I said take care of it," right? And I said to him, "Coach, I have to go against. This is my resistance movement. You asked me to take care of my hair, and I took care of it." He said, "I asked you to cut your hair." I said, "The word was take care." And so, these moments in life that we encounter this resistance, that something within us feels like there's an injustice around us, and we have this moment in us to go against the grain, to go against the man. This week, we're talking about Sabbath. See, in Genesis, as God created the universe, as he was doing that, it says on the last day, on the seventh day, he rested. Now, often in our minds, when we hear someone is resting, we think they must be exhausted or tired. Right? When I rest, when I lay down on the couch, it's because I'm tired and I need my body to be recharged. And the problem with that is that's not why God rested in that moment. See, he rested because his work was done. He rested because what he had done was beautiful. See, he rested because he was taking delight in creating us and creating the universe and all that was there. He rested because it was good, because there was beauty in his work. In Exodus, God is downloading his Ten Commandments to the people, and in the commandments, he shares, I want you to have a day of rest, a day of Sabbath, and I want you to do this. And in this passage, he talks about it. He talks about it from a creation standpoint. But today I want to look at the passage of Deuteronomy, when God is going back to the people, when he brings Moses back to them, and he brings the Ten Commandments. And we're going to look in Deuteronomy 5. So if your Bible, your phone, Deuteronomy 5, we're going to be reading from the New Living Translation today. Verses 1 through 6 and then 12 through 15. Moses called all the people of Israel together and said, listen carefully, Israel, hear the decrees and regulations that I'm going to give you today so that you may learn and obey them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Mount Sinai. The Lord did not make this covenant with our ancestors, but with all of us who are alive today. At the mountain, the Lord spoke to you face to face from the heart of the fire. I stood as an intermediary between you and the Lord, for you were afraid of the fire and did not want to approach the mountains. He spoke to me, and I passed his words on to you. And this is what he said. I am the Lord your God, who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. Jump down to verse 12. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a day of Sabbath, day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your oxen and donkey, and other livestock, and other foreigners living among you. All your male and female servants must rest as you do. And here's why. I want you to remember that you were once slaves in Egypt. But the Lord your God has brought you out with his strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on this Sabbath day. Today I have read from the greatest book ever written, and I bear witness to its truth. This passage has come on the heels of the people of Israel having been wandering in the desert for 40 years. They have been wandering because this is kind of like this is a penalty for the choices that their parents have made, right? They had been given an opportunity 40 years ago to walk into paradise, to take what God had already given to them. But in the face of this moment, they've chosen fear over faith. They've chosen to be afraid of what God has for them and afraid of the challenges ahead. I know the problem in this moment is that God has a new group of people that he's got to download his story to again. He's taking this group that's been wandering around, and see in chapter 4, he's reminding them of the obedience that is the commanded of God. Then in chapter 6, so we have, in 4, he's reminding them of what they've come from, and then in verse 6, he gives them this beautiful prayer of the Shema. And if you don't know that prayer, I highly encourage you to sing it like you did at the last song, right? The last song, you actually sung part of the Shema in that prayer where it talks about that I want you to tell the generations that what I have done for you, right? So in chapter 4, he's telling them what he has done. In chapter 5, he's giving them the commandments that he has for them. And then in 6, he says, now you need to tell the generations what I have done. I want you to tie it to your wrists and paint it on your doorposts. So here in verse 5, he's giving them the commandments again. In the beginning, Moses clearly states to them, I need you to learn and obey these moments, what I'm going to share with you. I like to think that Moses is kind of putting on his fatherly figure with these people. Because he's almost imploring them To the point of saying, I need you to obey this. I need you to learn this so you don't make the same mistakes that have come before you. 40 years they wandered. Now listen and obey. So what Moses does is he reminds them of the covenant of God. He reminds them of the commands that God has given to them, of His faithfulness and His goodness. You see, in Exodus, Sabbath was grounded in the creation that God had done. But in Deuteronomy, Sabbath is grounded in the liberation and resistance against Pharaoh and the systemic injustice in Egypt. You see, when they were in Egypt, they weren't allowed to celebrate Sabbath unless they were told them they could. Right? Pharaoh would work them and work them and work them, and if he wanted to, he would allow them to celebrate this. And now God is saying to them, I need you to celebrate Sabbath. I need you to observe the Sabbath because of where I have brought you from. Because of the resistance that I've created within you. You need to go wherever you go and have that resistance built into you so that you say no to the things that are going to come up in your life that want to take your attention away from me. That you have these moments to celebrate Sabbath with me, to rest in me. That I'm giving you the permission, the command to stop. That this is going to be built into who you are to rest. Remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God has brought you out with His strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath. You see, He wants them to always remember what it was like to be slaves to something. That your choice to rest on the Sabbath is going against the man. That you have a choice and a chance to rest in me because you have been set free. You are no longer slaves. You are liberated. See, I believe pastors are some of the worst people at celebrating Sabbath. It was always hard for my family as we were kind of growing, as we were going, when Sarah and I were first married and kind of getting into ministry, and we were working both ministry jobs and in the workplace, and so we were having this hard moment because we'd be at church and then we'd be working, and so this always hard for us to actually celebrate the Sabbath. And then a few years ago, I read the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in the book, John Mark Comer just calls you out and says, you have too much going on. You have too much going on in this moment. And the problem wasn't that the things that we were doing as a family were bad things. They were good, a lot of good stuff. Dylan beautifully shared a few weeks ago about the pace of our lives. And that it's not how fast you're going, because how fast one person goes in life, that pace might not be for someone else, but it's not wrong for that person, right? That the pace that you go it's not about the pace, right? It's the idea, are you fleeing or following something? And so what is your pace in that moment? What is the reason why you can't stop and rest, right? And so in that moment, as we started to look at our pace and what we were doing, I realized at times that I was trying to flee from something. I was fleeing from maybe being still with God. Because I think sometimes in our lives, we purposely engage in so many activities because we're afraid if we stop and sit with God, we're afraid that He won't be there. Or maybe we're afraid that if we actually stop and rest, we'll have nothing to say to God. That we've been running so hard and so fast, doing so many things, not taking the time to rest or be with God, that we're worried it won't be there. But even in that, as we live with margin and create margin in our lives, Dallas Willard shares beautifully that we must ruthlessly eliminate hurry in our lives. See, it's not about the pace, as Dylan shared, but it's about the idea that you're hurrying from something. See, for me, it had to be done. I had to stop, evaluate, and look at places in my life that just had to go. So that when I did celebrate Sabbath in those moments, that I could rest. That we could take the moment and just be with each other and with God. Growing up on a farm, there was a lot of work, dairy farming. You were milk in the morning and the evenings. But one thing I remember growing up was my dad and uncle tried, for the most part, as I remember, not doing harvesting or planting, the extra stuff outside the things that needed to be done on Sundays. And as a kid, I would remember other farmers in the area would still harvest and do their stuff on Sundays. But for us, they wouldn't do that kind of thing. And it was interesting that the stuff still got done. The things still were done, and we still had our harvest in. So the question is, in all of our things, in all of this moment, what does this look like for us? We're going to be going into Sabbath next week. And if we're trying to rest, if we're trying to eliminate the distractions and stop for a moment and just be with Jesus, to be with our families, I wanted to share with you, what does this look like? See, Sabbath rest looks like three things. We rest from working, from thinking about working, and wanting and worrying. And that last one can get really hard. See, that last one can be hard on our souls because, boy, I carry a lot of worry around with me at times. So what is your Sabbath going to look like next week? See, Sabbath rest is resistance against a culture around us. See, the culture around us continues to tell us that you need more, to do more, to be involved in more, to keep going and going and going until you're burned out. See, Moses needed the people to deeply understand something. He needed them to get it this time. That God didn't rest because he was exhausted. He rested because he had so much delight in what he had done. And see, God was changing this for them. Because now he wanted them to know, not only did I rest because of the delight, but now I want you to rest because you've been set free. See, you have been set free from the things that held you in bondage. That stuff no longer holds you. See, that work that you have to do right now, this moment, can probably wait just a little bit longer. See, that worry and that wanting and that fear, that can probably wait just a little bit longer. See, the problem, though, is that he wants them to understand this because God knows that if he doesn't put this as a command deep within their souls, that they'll return where they were before. Look at the path of Israel. How often do they continually return to becoming enslaved by somebody else? That they forget what God has commanded. It's not reminding them every single day of that rest. See, do not become what you have been set free from. See, God is calling to us. He's calling deep within our souls. Please, please, create margin, create rest. Don't go back to what I called you from. Do not become the slave driver of your own life. See, I want to heal you. When will you stop running? Do you know how hard it is to put a Band-Aid on a toddler or a child when they just won't stop moving? Right? They just look over here. You're trying to put something on them, and they won't stop moving. Right? Do you know how hard it is that if you're trying to clip your kid's nail and they don't want to move, they don't want their foot, they're pulling away from you because they're afraid, right? It's hard to take care of that. Do you know how hard it is to tell your child that you love them when they won't stop talking nonstop? Anybody have a kid that doesn't stop talking in their house? Anybody? I wonder what it's like for God. See, I wonder what it's like for God trying to get our attention. When he's trying to get us to understand how deeply he loves us, but you won't stop. You won't rest. You won't take a moment to just be still so he can get a hold of you and hug you. So he can get a hold of you and love you. Maybe there's wounds that you're carrying around with you, and God says, I just want you to stop so I can get a hold of you and help heal you. Man, what would it be like if we took just a few hours a week? I said, I'm shutting everything off, and these are the 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday where I can just rest, where I can participate in the things that delight the Lord. But more importantly, what if we stopped so he could heal you? What if he could provide the things that your soul deeply needs so he can love you and care for you? See, what if we stopped just for a moment and did that? To bandage my wounds and my soul. Jesus shares in Matthew chapter 11, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. He does not say to you, my offer to you is no yoke. Right? He doesn't come to you and say, I know that the world, you're attached to the things of this world, but I'm offering you no yoke. You can just go and do it on your own. No, he says, if you're going to be yoked to something, every single one of you is. Some of you are yoked to your pain. Some of you are yoked to your sin. Some of you are yoked to your job. Some of you are yoked to a lot of things in your life that you don't need to be tied to, yet you are. Everyone is going to be yoked down to something. And Jesus says, take my burden on you, take my yoke upon you, because that is light and that is easy. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And if I'm going to be walking with somebody, if I'm going to be walking next to someone that loves and cares for me, boy, I sure hope it's Jesus. Because that's the person I want next to me when my soul needs healing, when my heart needs for someone else to carry it, when I need someone to help me delight in the things that God has for me. Because here's the deal, if you are yoked to something, and everyone is, I want to actively lay down my life for one day, for a few hours, that God can say, Ryan, let's go away for a little bit, because I want to show you how much I love you. He wants us to never become enslaved to the things around us. He wants us to fight against the claims of the world, that if you are not working, if you are not running, you're going to be found out, hustling all the time. A.J. Swoboda shared this: Sabbath is scheduled social justice. It is an act of defiance against Pharaoh and his system, so we never become the slave drivers again. He wants you to know that when you rest in Sabbath, you are telling the world, you are telling the things around you, you do not have ownership of me, but God does. That in this moment that I am going to attach myself to the one who created me and the one who loves me. We get to resist by the implementation of Sabbath into our lives. So what does Sabbath look like for you? What does Sabbath look like in this moment? So let's put together just some things that you can use this next week as you get to celebrate Sabbath. So I suggest that you try to set, it's a full day aside if you can. Some people don't have that ability. You work 2 jobs, or you're working a lot, and you can only set a 3 or 4 hours aside, but let's just do 3 or 4 hours. But at the beginning of your Sabbath, whether it's a full day and you're starting in the evening, or you're celebrating on a Sunday afternoon because you're busy all day, whatever it is, set up this time away with God, with your family. And here's what I want you to do. As you start Sabbath this next week, I want you to take a piece of paper, and I want you to write down these 3 things. I want you to write down your worries, your sadnesses, and your unfinished tasks. What I want you to do is I want you to write those down. I want you to take it on the piece of paper, and I want you to put it away. Maybe you have a box on the mantle. Maybe you can just put it in a drawer in the kitchen. Whatever it is, I want you to take those things and write them down so that you're not going to carry them anymore. At least for that set time, you can just rest with God and delight in what He has for you. So those things, your worries, your sadnesses, and your unfinished tasks, and put them aside. You can always come back to them. They're going to be there, right? It's going to be there when Sabbath is done. And then I want you're going to hand out a file with all kinds of stuff for your Sabbath. You can go through with your family. And I suggest you just kind of go through that in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, as you do your Sabbath. And then I want you to find something that you delight in. A couple years ago, we went through Sabbath Bible study, and it was great. It was fantastic. And one thing that they talk about in there is pleasure stacking. It's all the things that you enjoy, that you delight in. I want you to take those things, I want you to stack them up and enjoy a few things together, right? Maybe your family enjoys going on a hike, right? You love being out in nature, you love going hike. Go for a hike with your family. Right? Maybe you haven't sat down and played board games in a long time. Play a board game together. Maybe you haven't had a chance to watch a movie that you've all been wanting to watch together. Just sit down and watch something together. Whatever it is, find these moments, these things that you can pleasure stack together, and enjoy each other and enjoy the day. And then one of my most favorite things is the Sabbath meal. The Sabbath meal at the end of your Sabbath time. And often, I encourage you to find someone, maybe a neighbor or a friend, maybe someone from church here, that you can share this Sabbath meal with. And I want you to have just a fantastic time together. Enjoy the meal, enjoy being with each other, celebrating all that God has done, right? And I want you to take those things that you've done, and I want you to talk about them with each other at that Sabbath meal. Talk about what it was like for you. Maybe it was hard. Maybe having that time was really difficult for you, but you did it anyways, and you set that aside. And I want you to remember this thing by Marjorie. If you struggle with this, right? If you struggle with Sabbath and feeling like you have too many things going on, I want you to think about this. Marjorie Thompson says this: honoring Sabbath is letting go of our treasured illusions of our indispensability. Because guess what? You're not that important. The world will still be there when you get back from Sabbath, right? The worries and your concerns, your fears, they'll still be there. You can go back to them. I would encourage you not to, but if you need to go pick up your fears and worries again, you can. But you're not that important that you can't celebrate Sabbath with God, that you can't take time away with Him. Because here's the reality. How is God going to help you heal? How is He going to teach you? How is He going to love you deeply if all you do is run? If all you do is go, 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 and you don't create a space to resist what the world has to offer, to yoke yourself to who God is, to His love and His grace and His hope for you. I want to pray for you today as we close, that God would just use your Sabbath next week as this amazing moment to just help you delight in His grace and His love.